Hey everyone, Maria and John here. We are planning our next fishing trip.
Trout? Bass?
I don't know. But first, we have the opportunity to sit down with the president of Waterworks-Lamson, Ryan Harrison.
I've been using lamps and reels for 15 years, and all I do is cast them out and reel them in. You don't have to worry about anything else. I like them.
Well, I like them too because I use yours all the time. It's a super cool, fun, interesting story. So take a look.
It's a family story, so it goes back to my sophomore year in high school, spring break, living in Los Angeles at the time, and we went out to Palm Springs for spring break, as we did in those days. And in the closest pool was a very attractive 16-year-old girl in a leopard skin bikini named Tammy Ferris, as it turns out. So, never wanted to miss the opportunity. I courted Tammy that week, and we became a little bit of a boyfriend-girlfriend thing for the next 6 months or so. But we lived 60 miles away from each other in the LA area, and it's not going to be sustainable when you're 16 years old and 60 miles separation. So that went its course, although I still probably have a little bit of a crush on her still. Now, my brother, during that same week, hooked up with one of Tammy's friends, who was also one of Tammy's older sister Kim's friend, and they had a little thing for that week as well. So now dial forward about 4 years, Tammy's older sister Kim and my older brother Michael are at Art Center together, Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. They're both students there. And they crossed paths, and they said, didn't your younger brother date my younger sister? And they started dating and got married. So that builds half the bridge. The other half was the fact that my brother, now married to Kim, became brother-in-law to Kim's older brother, Mark. And Mark and Michael, hated each other first, and then got to understand each other and liked each other and started working together. So now we're in the 1980s. My brother's a product designer, classically trained. He's got some experience already in the field of product design. And Mark was a philosophy major, I think, but a naturally creative, kind of a genius level inventor sort, who was racing mountain bikes at the time. And so my brother and Mark started designing cycling products and doing some really interesting things. That led to a meeting, circumstantial happenstance. Mark, on a flight, commercial flight, is seated next to Joe Montgomery, who is the founder of Cannondale Bicycles. And Mark, being Mark, proceeded to spend probably half an hour criticizing Joe about how crappy his bikes were. And at the end of the flight, or by the end of the flight, Joe had hired Mark and my brother, Michael, to be a skunkworks design team to help Cannondale innovate. So that led to my brother and Mark moving to Ketchum, Idaho, and dedicating, I don't know, maybe the next 5 years, 6 years, to innovating for Cannondale. And the major project is shown in this bike. They developed what came to be known as the head shock. And at the time in mountain biking, there was really only the front suspension systems were telescopic forks, like RockShox. They had the idea to centralize the suspension above a rigid fork, and that would require a custom, oversized head tube, which was no problem if you're making the frames, and as obviously Cannondale was. So they developed an oil-dampened needle-bearing system, a very sophisticated system, that ran above rigid forks in an oversized head tube, and again called the head shock. They added a feature, which was new at the time, of locking out that suspension system for climbing or other cases where you don't want your front end to have suspension. Major benefit, weight savings. Obviously, instead of having hardware on two sides of your fork, you have your hardware in a single location, that reduces the amount of material dramatically. It also eliminates the possibility of the forks compressing unevenly. You have rigid forks. This innovation is what put Cannondale mountain bikes on the map. They were known for road bikes before, and it led Cannondale to market share leadership among mountain bikes. And the internals, the engineering internals, still run on Cannondale bikes today in the Lefty. In that time, they were also doing interesting work for Kestrel, a high-end carbon fiber road bike specialist, and their work got Kestrel into mountain biking. They developed a rear suspension technology that was used on Scott bicycles as well as a Kestrel bike. So they were doing some very interesting things at the time, and I was watching them, and I was ready to jump from corporate America. And it was going to either be starting a brew pub and a microbrewery, or joining up with my brother and Mark and do some interesting things with them. So obviously I chose to do that in 1995. And we turned our attention from mountain biking and biking in general to fly fishing in 1995, and started designing initially reels, since that's kind of up our in our wheelhouse, I'll say, hard goods, engineering oriented. And, to demonstrate kind of the difference in the way we approached it, we're not a machine shop. We didn't look at other designs as templates to modify. We just started with a clean sheet of paper and began designing fly reels, from the ground up. And again, the objectives after meeting with those rod designers were to either go in the direction of the center axis, which we did with Sage through a licensing arrangement, or in the case of Waterworks, or Waterworks-Lamson later known, we weren't going to be able to do this. We have to have a conventional reel foot. Let's make the reel as light as possible. And so our first reel was the world's lightest machined reel. It still is today. Light, large arbor, which was new at the time and still surprises me that it was debated, whether that was a benefit. Anyway, large arbor, lightweight, mechanical simplicity. Our first reel had 23 parts, and typical reel would have 80 or 85 parts at the time. It's part of how we made it lighter, but also more reliable. Our reels became known as being bulletproof. They required no maintenance, self-lubricating parts, for example, fully sealed drag systems so that you wouldn't have material getting into your drag and affecting its performance, and eliminating any maintenance requirements from that. So type 3 hard anodize, which was not being used, which makes a finish that almost is impossible to break through. Using titanium, using exotic materials where relevant. Those things set us apart. And when we first introduced our reels, they looked very different. It was fun to watch people's heads explode. Some people got us right away and became fans. And then as we had time to develop our designs, make them a little bit more accessible, affordable, approachable, our audience got bigger and bigger, and our reputation grew. And over the course of 20 years, we became the world's, I can't say the world's, I don't know that that's true, the U.S. leading reel brand. That's measured in industry research. We started the business in fly fishing with the DBA Waterworks, the Waterworks. That's what we were known as in the first 3 years of fly fishing. And then, because we had a relationship with Sage, doing the Center Axis project and helping them with some design of other reels as well, we had a rapport with the management team of that time, and we were aware that, by the way, they were the owners of Lamson fly reels at that time. Sage had bought Lamson from the original Charlie Lamson, the machine shop owner, who made the first Lamson reels. Sage bought the Lamson facility and the trademark from Charlie, and they were making Lamson reels, but they were having headaches. Reels are hard to make. It wasn't their main business, and I think one of the comments was, it's 5% of our revenue and 95% of our headache, or something like that. And I said, hey, if you ever want to sell Lamson, let us know. We'd be interested in buying the trademark, and we'd work the assets around somehow. So in 1998, long story short, we did buy Lamson from Sage, and we then became Waterworks-Lamson. Long name, but we wanted to capture both because Waterworks had already established an identity of innovation, and our first reel had already come out under the Waterworks name. And the reason we wanted Lamson was it was a well-known brand of fly reels at the time, still is, and it had a good reputation, and it could just allow us to bring our design to a much wider audience much faster with that name associated with it. So that's the backstory on Waterworks-Lamson.
If you could, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and check out our next video. Thanks for watching.